Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. And I think we have a pretty good show today. We have an incredible story to...
Sorry to intrude.
Oh, hey, Sylvia.
Did you tell them that I'm on the show today?
Well, I was trying to.
Oh, hey, that sounds great.
As I was saying, we have a story today about two Facebookers who encounter a UFO.
That's amazing.
Sylvia Schultz is here with more ghost stories for us. And we have one of my favorite Harry Harrison short stories.
Okay.
Add a special surprise, and it all begins with this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by quality. Do you appreciate quality in your stories? Well, we're all over that here at the RAS. Today's story not only exudes quality, it throws a bit of sophistication in as well. Check it out.
Our story takes us to the Long Island home of wealthy Mrs. Nottingham. Set in dense growth on a hill, lonesome, secluded, and dark. The shadow of a human figure climbs into a window, crosses the unlighted room to a safe in the wall. 2 minutes later, the figure is gone, and in a matter of minutes, turmoil rules the house.
Oh, this is terrible. Terrible. Philip, who could have done such a thing?
Did anybody know you had the sapphire here, Mrs. Nottingham?
Only Jamie and I. It was just delivered from the bank this afternoon.
What's going on down here?
Oh, Jamie.
The safe. Afraid we've had a thief in the night, Jamie.
They've stolen the sapphire. It's gone. Jamie, could it have been one of the servants?
But Aunt Laura, none of them knew the stone was here.
What's that stuck back in the safe there?
Well, it's an envelope addressed to me.
What? Well, then let's open it. Plain paper, typewritten. It says, 7th November, 1945, dear Mrs. Nottingham. Meet me at the Old Stone Mill Wednesday night at 9. Bring with you $5,000 in cash, small bills, and I will return your sapphire. If you report this theft, you'll never see the Nottingham sapphire again.
No signature?
No. And whoever did it must have known the stone was to be brought here, Aunt Laura. Look at the date. 7th November. That was yesterday. This robbery must have been planned for days.
Well, there's nothing to do except get the stone back again. Tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, I'll meet our thief at the Old Stone Mill. So he was as good as his word, Inspector Webster. I went alone to the mill, handed him the money, took the sapphire, and left.
Yes, and a day later, you reported the matter to the police.
But my aunt had to be sure of getting the stone back, Inspector.
I begged Mrs. Nottingham to let me accompany her. Since I came from England 3 weeks ago, I've been a guest in her house. I wanted to help.
But this note, it tells us a great deal, Mrs. Nottingham.
What, Inspector?
Whoever wrote it is obviously the thief. Someone who was close enough to you to manage the combination of the safe.
I'm afraid that's true, Aunt Laura.
The sapphire was delivered from the bank a few hours before it was stolen. And only you, Mrs. Nottingham, and your nephew knew about it. None of the servants did. Mr. Philip Harrison here. Is he the only Englishman in your house?
Why, yes.
And do you really want to find the thief?
Oh, of course we do.
Then I may as well tell you. I'm arresting Mr. Harrison as the thief. Come along, Harrison. I'll take your confession at headquarters.
What led Inspector Webster to believe Philip Harrison was the culprit? In a moment, we'll hear the solution, but first...
Sophistication and quality. We have a good, clear mystery with motive and at least 2 suspects. Do you have any idea of who may have done it? Was it Philip the Englishman? The detective thinks so. Or Jamie? Let's go find out.
And now, back to our story.
Until Philip Harrison confessed, we had no proof of his guilt, although the note itself was enough for me. As you probably know, we Americans always date our letters by first designating the month, then the day. In England, the custom is different. Letters are dated day first, then the month, as in the note, 7th November, 1945. So you can see, in that note, Philip Harrison unconsciously wrote his own confession.
It's all in the details. You have to think these crimes through, you know. The date? What a clever detective, and dare I say, one of the best 5-minute mysteries we've ever had on the show. This 5-minute mystery was brought to you by Quality.
What's that you say?
Well, first off, today I have to announce a retraction. Last week, during the What's That You Say segment, I incorrectly stated that Jose Munoz was from California. I stand corrected. He in fact lives in Virginia and not California. He added, not that there's anything wrong with California. Thank you, Jose. I received this email from Todd White from Oakland, California. I almost had to throw this one out because it was from Oakland. You see, my very own Portland Trailblazers are locked in mortal combat with the Warriors, and I saw this as a conflict of interests. But then I realized that Todd can't help where he's from, so here is what he writes. Hello, Ron. I love the podcast and your highly different format. There's no one out there doing what you do. Keep doing it. I do have a question about the 5-minute mysteries. Not that I'm getting tired of them. They are kind of your podcast signature, but are you ever going to drop them? Todd from Oakland. Well, Todd, I think you're right about the 5-minute mysteries being a signature. I really don't foresee dropping them. I do have the idea of doing original versions and employing you guys to help me do it. Folks like Mark Nelson, David Larson, and just recently Cody Mustache Apadale have expressed interest in doing just that. I am a huge fan of the short story concept with an OTR element thrown in just for fun. Doing a full-scale radio show is a lofty goal, but I think the 5-minute model is doable. Back last October, I created original versions using the backbone of the segment, and the response was pretty good. Look for more of that in the future. I've said this before, and I say it again now. If anyone wants to write an original 5-minute mystery script, I want to read it. You can find examples of the script on the website, the OTR Script Library. They have over 177 vintage radio series online. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And now, this from our sponsor. Did you hear that Gladys Goodies is starting to hear from you guys? I want to thank everyone that has gone to their site to check out the dog treats. Gladys is the first commercial business that has reached out to support Ron's amazing stories. And I think it's pretty great that we have the power to reach back and support them. Gladys makes all natural treats that are good for your dogs to eat. They also carry a good variety of swag to make your dog's tail wag. Just head to GladysGoodies.com and see for yourself. Pick out a few things and be sure to use our special promo code RONS, that's RONS, to get your very own 20% discount. How about that? And thank you for listening. It's now time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Our first story comes from Marcella Cunningham. This is one of the strangest we've had and certainly stands out as original. I received this on the website from a blocked email. That just means that whenever I send a reply, it just got kicked back to me. I have no sense on whether this story is true, fiction, or what. As an editor, I have many tools to make sure it's original, meaning not plagiarized. And from that aspect, we're good to go. You'd be surprised at the number of stories I get that are stolen from internet posts on Reddit. I like this story and I want to read it. To Marcella, I say, thank you for sending this in. I did have to gently edit it for time and reading purposes. Ron, thank you for your podcast. I look forward to it each week. I used to listen on the radio on Sunday night until you mentioned that you could be found on TuneIn Radio. I now listen to you there. I want to share an experience with you that I had with an old friend. I had a best friend named Becky in middle school who I lost contact with when she transferred in the 8th grade. 2 years later, I have a dream that I visited her new school and we sat in the back of her math class. In the dream, her teacher was a tall brunette with curly hair and wearing glasses. The next day, I get a message on Facebook from her, which was completely out of the blue because we hadn't spoken in months. She writes me to tell me how she's doing and that she's still having trouble with math. I've always been good at it, so I helped her with math and she helped me with English. I thought, how odd. I wrote her back and told her about my dream. Within seconds I got a reply. She freaks out and tells me that she sits in the back of her math class and her teacher fit the description I gave her from my dream perfectly. The next night, I was out walking my dog around the neighborhood with a friend. We would occasionally look up to the sky in awe of the stars. I saw a fast-moving light like a meteor, but slower, although much faster than an airplane. Then it made an impossible 90-degree turn, first to the right, then to the left, and it disappeared. My friend and I both stopped, looked at each other, and said at the same time, "Did you see that?" A woman's voice from behind us spoke out. I sure did. I'd never seen anything like that before. We both turned, and standing there was a young woman who was tall, brunette, with curly hair and wearing glasses. She introduced herself as Mary. We talked for quite a while about what we had seen. Through our discussion, she mentioned that she was a teacher. I stopped in mid-sentence and mentioned my old friend's name. She was, in fact, Becky's math teacher. Was all of this coincidence? Why the UFO and why the strange connections? I renewed my friendship with Becky and we're better friends than ever. I am now a junior in high school, and yes, I still help her with her math, and she still proofreads my English assignments. Marcella Cunningham from Parts Unknown. Well, that is an amazing story, Marcella. I felt kind of funny editing your story. I thought about contacting Becky to have her do it. That seems like a lot of coincidence to me, but really, who knows how the universe works? Thank you for your story. This next story is from Ara, who lives and works on the Grand Cayman Island. It is the largest of the Cayman Islands and is a British-occupied territory in the Caribbean. Ara's story takes place during the Heritage Festival, specifically Pirates Week, where they have days of mock pirate invasions and celebrate their culture and heritage. This is followed by District Heritage Days. These celebrations span 5 days, where each district celebrates their own unique traditions, artifacts, food, and people. The celebrations conclude with the invasion of Little Cayman, as the pirates make one last stop before heading out to sea for another year. Now, I did this research so Ara's story will make a bit more sense. He has titled it Night of Fright. It was night in Grand Cayman, and I was over at a friend's house playing video games after a long day of celebration. This was our country's Heritage Day, a day where we celebrate our past and live like our ancestors did. It was getting late, so I packed up my stuff and said goodnight to my friend Justin. I started my walk home. I live only about a mile away from him, so it's not too much for me to walk. I was about a third of the way through my journey and alone when I saw a guy about 30 to 40 years old, dressed in pirate regalia, walk right by me. He was walking with his head down and just passed by me without saying a word. Thinking it was someone who was just celebrating our Heritage Day, I thought nothing of it. As I continued my journey home, I noticed someone crossing me again. I looked up at the person and noticed that he too had on pirate's clothing. I took a closer look and realized that it was the same man that had passed me head down before. This time his eyes met mine, and I swear they were bright red. I also saw he had his sword drawn. His face was gaunt and white as a ghost. I said nothing and ran the rest of the way home. I'm not sure what I saw that night, but it was not from this world. Looking back, I think this ghost probably just wanted to see if his people were still celebrating what made our country what it is today. Aura from the Grand Cayman Island. Well, Aura, all I can say is chills. What a great and creepy story, and so well told. Thank you for sending this one in, and I guess the moral of this story is, if you're out during Pirates Week, be sure to carry a sword. Thank you, Aura. Don't think you got enough stories this week? Well, how about we head to Sylvia's place for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. We all love a good story, but what we truly crave is a ghost story. It's time now for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Sylvia Schultz is a librarian and author by day, but at night, she becomes a ghost hunter. Following a lifetime spent in the pursuit of the weird and the strange, her non-fiction works include Ghost of the Illinois River, Fractured Spirits, 44 Years in Darkness, Hunting Demons, and The Spirits of Christmas. We now cross over the veil and join Sylvia as she tells us more tales from the unknown. Are you there, Sylvia?
I'm here. Come on in, Ron.
Well, thank you so much. You know, you're always so inviting.
Oh, I enjoy visitors.
The listeners' feedback I get is I've had everything from "you're fabulous" to "I can't wait till the next Ghost Stories with Sylvia." That's what I get.
Oh, that's marvelous.
And my own brother said you were enchanting. You're getting fans out there.
I'm so delighted.
Well, I know that you've got some stuff to talk about, so let's jump right in with some upcoming events, because I know that that's important to you today.
Yes, I am so excited. Tomorrow morning, I am going to take off on a road trip. I have a nearly 6-hour drive to the Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa.
You don't just go to the movies, do you?
No, not often.
Okay, so why is this house called a axe murder house?
Well, because I'm afraid an axe murder took place there in 1912. It was, and I always forget exactly how many people, but it was the mother, the father, and I can never remember whether it was 2 or 4 of their children and 2 little girls that were spending the night. Ina and Lena Stillinger. The little girls' names are the only ones I can never remember. I don't know why. But yeah, it was a Saturday night, and they had gone to a church service on Saturday night and came back real late. So Ina and Lena were invited to spend the night. So they all curled up in bed, and about, in the wee small hours of the morning, the assailant crept down from the attic where he was hiding and went through the house and slaughtered everyone.
Crazy.
And the next morning, the neighbors were like, well, hey, these guys aren't outside taking care of their chickens and stuff like that. What's going on? And they came over and they found the crime scene, and the police just traipsed all over the crime scene and just made a mess, and it never has been solved. So
Really, the guy got away with it.
Yeah. And there's a ghost hunter and author named Troy Taylor who is actually going to be hosting this investigation, and he's written a book on the whole thing, and he has tied that into several other murders that were committed near railroad tracks. It was real near the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's his theory, is that the same guy committed all of these murders that happened around 1912.
And you're going to go in there and try to talk to the spirits that are there.
It's even better than that. I asked Troy. Oh, yeah. Like I said, I don't go to the movies very often, but I talked to Troy the other day, and I knew that you weren't allowed to sleep in the house, but there's an outbuilding that you can throw a sleeping bag down and sleep in the outbuilding. So I made sure that was still the case. And Troy said, well, that's not exactly so. You're not allowed to sleep on the beds in the house. But if you're the last one standing and you have a sleeping bag and you want to roll it out on the parlor floor
Sylvia,
and sleep in the house, you can do that.
Oh, Sylvia.
Oh, yes. So I am going to take a sleeping bag, but I'm going to sleep on top of the sleeping bag just in case I have to nope it out of there real quick.
You've never done anything like this, have you?
Well, I have actually. I spent the night at Edinburgh Manor in Iowa, but that was wonderful. I had a bed. It was one of the beds that the patients used to sleep in, which was awesome. But I had other people with me. I had three other people in the room with me, so I knew there were other people there. If I've got someone else with me, I'm fearless.
Okay. So I guess kind of last time we were talking about some of your possible psychic abilities. Do you have any update for us on that?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about this a little while ago, and I was making bread, actually. I was in the kitchen working on a loaf of bread, and I have been baking bread since I was 8 years old. So I've been baking for decades. I've killed my fair share of yeast. I've had the water too hot. I've had the water too cold. And I've turned out some really wretched loaves of bread. But I've learned how to feel that yeast is alive. If I have a really good batch of bread going, if I have a good rise to the dough, I can put my hands on this lump of dough as I'm kneading it, and I can feel that it's going to turn out well. I can feel the aliveness of the yeast inside that matrix of flour and water. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself when I was kneading it last time, what if that feeling is the same feeling that psychic mediums get when they're in a place that they know is haunted? So I thought, well, maybe I could develop that. I know what that feels like through my hands when I'm touching bread dough. Maybe I could reach out with my conscience or psyche and learn to teach myself how that feels in my head. Yeah.
You're not going to do this in the Axe house, are you?
Oh, that would be the perfect place to do it.
Couldn't you practice on puppies?
I suppose I could practice at the Peoria State Hospital, which I know for a fact is haunted.
Yes.
And I know the hot spots there, and that would be a good baby steps.
Well, and they know
that would be a good place for baby steps. Yes, that is the big thing, is the spirits there know me, and they're going to be gentle with me if I tell them what I'm trying to accomplish.
Well, now you've got me worried about you.
I promise to check back in after this weekend.
Okay. Well, you know what? I've had a psychic on the show before.
Oh.
And what they told me was, and this is, I don't know if this is helpful, and you probably already know this, and maybe I'm just saying this for the listeners, but there are some things you can do to protect yourself.
Oh, yes.
And you're aware of all that.
Yes, and I plan to do that. There are things that I do to protect myself. When I'm cuddling into sleep that tomorrow night, I am going to be clutching black tourmaline in my one hand and rose quartz in my other hand.
Can I assume that this is going to be a Lights Out episode?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It is going to be Lights Out number 80. So, yeah, that's a big one.
You're going to have to make sure that we get that into the show notes. It probably won't be out for probably a month or so.
Oh, it won't be out for quite some time. I've got other episodes planned. Yeah. But it'll be in the lineup.
Wow, that's crazy. So can you give us an update on your book?
Sort of. It's at the publishers, and I was hoping to get it out by next weekend, but I don't know if that's going to happen by now. So I had a big thing. We talked about it last time, I believe, that I've got a big event coming up next weekend at the Peoria State Hospital. I was hoping to have it out, but I don't know that it's going to happen.
Well, that's the problem with publishers. They do things on their own time, not yours. And if you want to get it on your time, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. I know the business too, and it's just that's how it is. So, okay, well, you'll keep us posted on that.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you will. All right. Now let's get to the chunk of the matter. Do you have some ghost stories for us today?
I most certainly do.
Okay, well, what's the title for this one? Usually have something that binds these stories together. What is it this time?
Well, the theme for this time is going to be things that make you go, And I love stories like that, just random weird stuff.
It's interesting you should mention that, because I just had on the podcast this last week, I had 2 stories that were head scratchers. And I mentioned in the podcast last week, I love head scratchers because they're just, you can't say, well, that didn't happen, or you can't disprove them. They're just what happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of like, I put jam on my bread. Don't know how it happened, but it worked.
Yeah. Who'd have thought of putting peanut butter on celery,
Oh, I love that. Oh, right? That's so good.
Who thought about that?
And you know what?
Celery, peanut butter.
Well, and you know what?
What?
It is a very, very healthy thing to do.
It is. Healthy and tasty. It's wonderful.
Though you burn more calories eating celery than you do actually eating them.
Huh. That must be why people like it as a diet food.
All right, let's get to the stories.
Okay. All right, so in the early 1900s, there were some groundskeepers working at the Lutheran Cemetery in Milford, Iowa. They were trying to do their groundskeeping duties. What they were doing was building a fence along the cemetery border. And the augers and the shovels that they were using to build this fence would twist and break, and they were trying to dig a post hole, and the tools would move. They'd go off for a break, and the tools would be gone, and the tools were just twisting themselves out of true while they were digging in this certain area. They were trying to dig a post hole in a certain place. So they just got disgusted with the whole thing, and they just dug up the entire area. And at that fence line where they were trying to put the post hole, they discovered an unrecorded coffin.
Oh, okay. Well, that's just creepy. That doesn't make
Well, how about this?
Okay.
There is a church in Oak Park, a suburb of Chicago, kind of close to where I grew up, and it's called St. John's Methodist Church. They are very welcoming. They welcome all sorts of people to their congregation. You don't have to be Methodist to join in their church services. The basement of this particular church is very active. It's the home to the ghost of an old lady and another kind of mischievous phantom that likes to play tricks on visitors. On at least one occasion, several parishioners were down in the basement and they were playing pool. And as they were playing, one of the balls just disappeared. And they looked in all the pockets. They're like, we're missing a ball. And they looked in all the pockets. They looked on the floor. They looked underneath the pool table. They could not find this missing pool ball. And after they had looked in all the pockets and looked around, the ball dropped from the ceiling.
Oh, no.
And landed with a thud on the table.
Okay, that's a head scratcher. I mean, they just poof and drops.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, playful ghost. I love playful ghosts.
Yeah. I've also got some stories about not the entire ghost, but body parts. In 1891, there was a newspaper that had a little snippet about something called the Denison Burial Ground, which was near a freight depot. And the only reason the railroad company set up this burying ground was it was intended wholly for the internment of hands, legs, fingers, and other such arts of human beings as are mashed and mutilated by the cars in such a manner as necessitates amputation. So they had an entire burying ground just for bits of people.
Okay, that does make me go, huh? But it also makes me go, ew.
Yes. But that's not the only, Denison is not the only place where there are random body parts that are actually doing the haunting instead of entire bodies. On Mackinac Island in Michigan, huge tourist destination, but what a lot of these tourists don't know is that the Revolutionary War era Fort Mackinac is the scene of a haunting that, it's really gross. People will see amputated body parts around the hospital of the fort.
Just sitting there.
Just lying around.
Ghostly body parts.
Yeah, freshly amputated limbs. And Mount St. Mary's College in Emmitsburg, Maryland, is haunted by a severed hand. And it belonged to a slave that was accused of and punished for stealing.
Oh, I knew.
Apparently the hand.
They did that a lot.
Apparently the hand, just, you lose the hand. And it spends its time crawling up walls, looking for imprudently opened windows that it crawls in. Yeah.
And this has been seen?
Yeah.
It reminds me of the old television show, The Addams Family thing.
Exactly.
We never knew what it was other than he was a disembodied hand.
Right. Don't know whose hand it was.
Yeah. And I just have always thought that was my favorite character on The Addams Family was Thing. He was the funniest and he never said anything.
Right. He didn't have to. He was just a hand that crawled around.
Okay. Got any more for us?
I sure do. There is an old hospital in Cripple Creek, Colorado that has several ghosts, and one of them is, well, they call him Stinky.
Oh, no.
They don't know who this ghost is. They don't know who it used to be, but they call him Stinky because it's a ghost who manifests on a back stairway just as a disgusting odor.
And they know nothing.
That's it. That's the story.
Okay, that doesn't make me go, that makes me go, okay.
Oh, well, there's another one. Here's another one for you. There's Keene, New Hampshire has the Sumner Night Chapel. And that has a very unusual ghost. The ghost, the entirety of this haunting, is the unmistakable taste of soap. And if anyone uses bad language in the vicinity of the chapel.
No.
Yes.
They immediately feel soap in their mouth?
Yes.
Oh, and there's people that have tested this, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they have.
And where was this again?
That was in Keene, New Hampshire.
Huh.
The Sumner Night Chapel.
Okay.
Yeah.
That one makes me go, huh?
Here's another one that should make you go,
Okay.
A couple had just moved into a new apartment, and they were doing some painting, just make the apartment their own, put their own stamp on it. The husband painted the walls of one room white, and the wife was preparing to stain the woodwork in it. She put an unopened can of stain in the middle of the room, and then the doorbell rang. So she went downstairs, found a friend at the door, and the two of them went back upstairs. When they went into the room that the wife was staining the woodwork, a roll of masking tape rolled towards them and just stopped right at their feet. Also, there was a dark stain splattered on the newly painted white wall. The can of stain was still in the middle of the floor, unopened, its contents untouched.
Okay, that made me go,
Yeah.
Any more about the house or anything? Does it have a history or anything? Or
Nope. That was the whole story.
That's incredible. Okay, we have time for one more story if you've got one.
Okay. This came from a book called Haunted Lakes 2. And I believe it has to do with a lighthouse. There were a father and son, and they were sitting around the kitchen table in the lighthouse that they took care of, when the father noticed that the clock on the wall was broken. And he's like, man, I am so tired of this clock not keeping the right time. It's just giving us nothing but problems. So he told his son to get rid of it. He said, just take it into the swamp and just throw it away, throw it as far as you can. Just let the swamp have it. So later that day, the son did exactly as his father asked and tossed it into the swamp. He heard the splash as the clock sank beneath the waters. 2 days later, the father, the son, and a neighbor were sitting around the same kitchen table, and the father noticed that the clock was still hanging on the wall. And the father turned to the son and said, look, I thought I told you to get rid of that. And the son swore up and down that he had thrown it into the swamp 2 days earlier, heard the splash, knew it was gone, and the neighbor just, nope. The neighbor left and never returned to the house, never came back for a visit. Like, nope, no.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Well, there could be a very simple explanation for that.
Oh?
Have you heard of quantum physics?
Yes.
Well, possibly we have two alternate time zones that crossed. And in one of these time periods, the clock existed, and the other one, it does not. It's that simple.
Yeah, okay. I'll buy that. I don't know how narrow these bands of time are that they could cross like that, but, it could happen.
Sure. It happens all the time. Yeah. All right, Sylvia. Well, I want to thank you for your stories this week. They have been, definitely,
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell us again what you're up to and what's going on with the blog and your podcast, Lights Out.
Well, in honor of the book coming out, the next episode of Lights Out is going to be a second visit with the boy in the basement. I'm going to go downstairs and chat with Chris, and with the help of my medium friend, Diane, we're going to have a lovely conversation, and he's going to tell us all about what it was like growing up in the very late years of the 19th century.
Oh, that sounds excellent.
Yes, we'll dance too. He talked me into dancing with him.
Hey, that would be a great time to work on your psychic, at least empathetically. Maybe you could feel something there.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to going back into the basement because I know, knowing Chris as I do, I know that if I told him what I was up to, he would do his very best to help me. Now, I can talk to him. I can say, would you please hold my hand? And he will let me know that he's there by holding my hand so that I can feel it. So he's very good about that.
And what's good is that you'll have the medium there, a trusted medium that can help you say, okay, this is happening. And then it'll give you a kind of a feedback loop.
Feedback, so exactly. That was the word I was thinking of, yeah. And that's exactly what happened. I had my hand, after we danced last time I was down there, I put my hand, I usually hold my hand out to him palm up, but we were sitting next to each other, so I put my hand palm down, and I reported to the medium. I said, I can feel pressure on both sides of my hand, top and bottom. And she said, yes, he's holding your hand and he's got his other hand on top of yours.
Wow.
So that was so great.
When can we expect that lights out?
I'm hoping to put it together this week. So probably by the end of this coming week, after I get back from Villisca.
That's assuming that you do come back from Villisca.
Yes.
All right. Well, Sylvia, this has been another great chat, and I surely do appreciate you inviting us in each time.
Oh, absolutely. I am delighted to have you along.
Goodbye now.
Bye.
Amazing Flubs and Flubbery.
We've done this before, and you guys seem to like it. We do not live in a perfect world. In fact, very far from it. On the podcast, you get to hear the finished product of my work. But how about when things go sideways? Here is an outtake from the Ghost Stories with Sylvia you just heard. I hope you enjoy it. Sylvia sure did. You know, though, you burn more calories eating celery than you do...
than you get from it.
Than you get from it. Yeah, thank you. I kind of messed that one up, but let me try that again.
Okay.
Did you know that you use more calories than you can? I did it again.
There, you had it.
Okay, let me try it one more time. Good thing I can cut all of this out. All right. Did you know that I've lost it, Sylvia. Am I going to have to write this out?
No. That you actually burn more calories by eating celery than you get from it.
That's right. Okay. Did you know that you burn more calories than you get when you don't? Okay, we've got our first...
Burn, eating, get from.
I'll try again.
Okay.
Okay, I gotta calm myself. Okay. Sylvia, did you know that you burn more calories than you do by eating them? No.
No, that's not right. You burn more calories eating celery than you get from it.
All right, I'm writing this out. Okay. Did you know that you burn more calories eating them than... No, now I can't even type it.
Eating celery.
Celery. Then you do... No,
then
that's
you
not...
get from it.
Then you get from...
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's try this again.
Okay.
Sylvia, did you know that you burn more calories eating celery than you do actually eating them?
As read by amazing stories, read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a story that we've had on the show before. It is one of my favorites called Toy Shop and was written by Harry Harrison. It first appeared in Analog magazine in the April 1962 edition and is read for us by Albatross.
The gadget was strictly, beyond any question, a toy, not a real, workable device, except for the way it could work under a man's mental skin. Because there were few adults in the crowd, and Colonel Biff Houghton stood over 6 feet tall, he could see every detail of the demonstration. The children, and most of the parents, gaped in wide-eyed wonder. Bill Houghton was too sophisticated to be awed. He stayed on because he wanted to find out what the trick was that made the gadget work. "It's all explained right here in your instruction book," the demonstrator said, holding up a garishly printed booklet open to a 4-color diagram. "You all know how magnets pick up things, and I bet you even know that the Earth itself is one great big magnet. That's why compasses always point north. Well, the atomic wonder space wave tapper hangs onto those space waves. Invisibly all around us, and even going right through us, are the magnetic waves of the Earth. The atomic wonder rides these waves just the way a ship rides on the waves of the ocean. Now watch." Every eye was on him as he put the gaudy model rocket ship on the table and stepped back. It was made of stamped metal and seemed as incapable of flying as a can of ham, which it very much resembled. Neither wings, propellers, nor jets broke through the painted surface. It rested on 3 rubber wheels, and coming out through the bottom was a double strand of thin insulated wire. This white wire ran across the top of the black table and terminated in a control box in the demonstrator's hand. An indicator light, a switch, and a knob appeared to be the only controls. "I turn on the power switch, sending a surge of current to the wave receptors," he said. The switch clicked, and the light blinked on and off with a steady pulse. Then the man began to slowly turn the knob. "A careful touch on the wave generator is necessary, as we are dealing with the powers of the whole world here." A concerted "ah" swept through the crowd as the space wave tapper shifted a bit, then rose slowly into the air. The demonstrator stepped back, and the toy rose higher and higher, bobbing gently on the invisible waves of magnetic force that supported it. Ever so slowly the power was reduced, and it settled back to the table. "Only $17.95, the young man said, putting a large price sign on the table, "for the complete set of the Atomic Wonder, the Space Tapper control box, battery, and instruction book." At the appearance of the price card, the crowd broke up noisily, and the children rushed away toward the operating model trains. The demonstrator's words were lost in their noisy passage, and after a moment he sank into a gloomy silence. He put the control box down, yawned, and sat on the edge of the table. Colonel Houghton was the only one left after the crowd had moved on. "Could you tell me how this thing works?" the colonel asked, coming forward. The demonstrator brightened up and picked up one of the toys. "Well, if you'll look here, sir." He opened the hinged top. "You'll see the space wave coils at each end of the ship." With a pencil he pointed out the odd-shaped plastic forms about an inch in diameter that had been wound, apparently at random, with a few turns of copper wire. Except for these coils, the interior of the model was empty. The coils were wired together, and other wires ran out through the hole in the bottom of the control box. Bill Houghton turned a very quizzical eye on the gadget, and upon the demonstrator, who completely ignored this sign of disbelief. "Inside the control box is the battery," the young man said, snapping it open and pointing to an ordinary flashlight battery. "The current goes through the power switch and the power light to the wave generator." "What you mean to say," Biff broke in, "is that the juice from this 15-cent battery goes through this cheap rheostat to those meaningless coils in the model, and absolutely nothing happens. Now tell me what really flies this thing. If I'm going to drop $18 for 6 bits worth of 10, I want to know what I'm getting." The demonstrator flushed. "I'm sorry, sir," he stammered. "I wasn't trying to hide anything. Like any magic trick, this one can't really be demonstrated until it has been purchased." He leaned forward and whispered confidentially. "I'll tell you what I'll do, though. This thing is way overpriced and hasn't been moving at all. The manager said I could let him go for $3 if I could find any takers. If you want to buy it for that price—" "Sold, my boy," the colonel said, slamming 3 bills down on the table. "I'll give that much for it, no matter how it works. The boys in the shop will get a kick out of it." He tapped the winged rocket on his chest. "Now, really, what holds it up?" The demonstrator looked around carefully, then pointed. "Strings," he said. "Or, rather, a black thread. It runs from the top of the model, through a tiny loop in the ceiling, and then back down to my hand, tied to this ring on my finger. When I back up, the model rises. It's simple as that." "All good illusions are simple," the colonel grunted, tracing the black thread with his eye. "As long as there's plenty of flim-flam to distract the viewer." If you don't have a black table, a black cloth will do, the young man said. And the arch of a doorway is a good sight. Just see that the room in back is dark. Wrap it up, my boy. I wasn't born yesterday. I'm an old hand at this kind of thing. Bill Houghton sprang it at the next Thursday night poker party. The gang were all missile men, and they cheered and jeered as he hammed up the introduction. Let me copy the diagram, Biff. I could use some of those magnetic waves in the new bird. Those flashlight batteries are cheaper than locks. This is the thing of the future. Only Ted Kaner caught wise as the flight began. He was an amateur magician and spotted the gimmick at once. He kept silent with professional courtesy and smiled ironically as the rest of the bunch grew silent one by one. The colonel was a good showman, and he had set the scene well. He almost had them believing in the space wave tapper before he was through. When the model had landed and he had switched it off, he couldn't stop them from crowding around the table. A thread, one of the engineers shouted, almost with relief, and they all laughed along with him. Too bad, the head project physicist said. I was hoping that little space wave tapping could help us out. Let me try a flight with it. Teddy Kaner first, Bill announced. He spotted it while you were all watching the flashing lights, only he didn't say anything. Kaner slipped the ring with the black thread over his finger and started to step back. You have to turn the switch on first, Biff said. I know, Kaner smiled, but that's part of illusion, the spiel and the misdirection. I'm going to try this cold first so I can get it moving up and down smoothly, then go through it with the whole works. He moved his hand back smoothly in a professional manner that drew no attention to it. The model lifted from the table, then crashed back down. The thread broke, Kaner said. You jerked it instead of pulling it smoothly, Biff said, and knotted the broken thread. Here, let me show you how to do it. The thread broke again when Biff tried it, which got a good laugh that made his collar a little warm. Someone mentioned the poker game. This was the only time that poker was mentioned or even remembered that night, because very soon after this they found that the thread would lift the model only when the switch was on, and 2.5 volts flowing through the joke coils. With the current turned off, the model was too heavy to lift. The thread broke every time. I still think it's a screwy idea, the young man said. 1 week getting fallen arches demonstrating these toy ships for every brat within 1,000 miles. Then selling the things for $3 when they must have cost at least $100 apiece to make. But you did sell the 10 of them to the people who would be interested, the older man asked. I think so. I caught a few Air Force officers and a colonel in missiles one day. Then there was one official I remembered from the Bureau of Standards. Luckily, he didn't recognize me. Then those 2 professors you spotted from the university. Then the problem is out of our hands and into theirs. All we have to do now is sit back and wait for the results. What results? These people weren't interested when we were hammering on their doors with the proof. We've patented the coils and can prove to anyone that there's a reduction in weight around them when they're operating. But a small reduction, and we don't know what's causing it. No one could be interested in a thing like that. A fractional weight decrease in a clumsy model? Certainly not enough to lift the weight of the generator. No one wrapped up in massive fuel consumption, tons of lift and such, is going to have any time to worry about a crackpot who thinks he found a minor slip in Newton's laws. You think they will now? The young man asked, cracking his knuckles impatiently. I know they will. The tensile strength of that thread is correctly adjusted to the weight of the model. The thread will break if you try to lift the model with it. Yet you can lift the model after a small increment of its weight has been removed by the coils. This is going to bug these men. Nobody's going to ask them to solve the problem or concern themselves with it, but it will nag at them because they know this effect can't possibly exist. They'll see at once that the magnet wave theory is nonsense, or perhaps true, we don't know. But they will all be thinking about it and worrying about it. Someone's going to experiment in his basement, just as a hobby, of course, to find the cause of the error. And he or someone else is going to find out what makes those coils work, or maybe a way to improve them. And we have the patents. Correct. They will be doing the research that will take them out of the massive lift propulsion business and into the field of pure spaceflight. And in doing so, they will be making us rich. Whenever the time comes to manufacture, the young man said cynically. We'll all be rich, son, the older man said, patting him on the shoulder. Believe me, you're not going to recognize this old world 10 years from now.
That is the podcast for this time. I hope you had a good time. I want to thank Jose Munoz, Todd White, Marcella Cunningham, Aura, and Albatross for taking part. You guys are amazing. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you'll find an amazing number of links that should fit every need. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is tell your friends all about it and leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. This does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.